We found a Reddit post entitled, "Nonprofit is Sucking My Soul." Let's talk about it.
Hi, we are Ted and Lisa Snyder, and we are nonprofit consultants because we believe a better world needs healthier nonprofits. And I think this Reddit post is a great example of possibly some room to grow in that healthy area. The title of this Reddit post is "Nonprofit is Sucking My Soul." And when we read that, I was like, do we know this person? I feel like we know this person. But it's a great post. It's going to give us a chance to talk through some leadership principles, some other things behind the scenes, and some differences between different roles within nonprofit that sometimes gets overlooked in the course of just trying to get everything done. Because there's so much work to do within the nonprofit sector, and it's easy to get bogged down, burned out, and to just wonder, how can I even come back from this? So let's jump into it.
As a leader, there's a lot of really great stuff to pull from this because you don't always get to see under the hood, and these Reddit posts are a great place to see kind of what people in your organization might be thinking and feeling. So then you can try to head that off at the pass and do a better job leading so this doesn't happen. Or if you're in a nonprofit and you're feeling like this is your chance to go, I'm not alone. And maybe as we discuss, we can talk about some ways to help alleviate some of the stuff that feels like it's sucking the life out of you. So here we go. Over the past 6 months, my job caused me literal anger or anguish almost every single day. Oof. That's tough.
Red flag number 47. I'm guessing this wasn't the last 6 months. It's probably been substantially longer. And there are probably at least 1 or 2 days a week that were causing anger or anguish, and they just didn't really even recognize it was happening, or did the thing that a lot of nonprofit workers do, which is where they say, yeah, my job sucks, but we're helping people. And so they justify a large percentage of their time being miserable because of the difference that's being made. And just because you're making a difference doesn't actually justify that other side of it. And when we don't address something early enough, it's really easy for it to become a 24/7 thing. And so I'm glad that this person is saying something now, but there's definitely more to the story that's probably been going on a significantly longer amount of time.
Another thing that happens is we'll stuff those feelings because we think, well, maybe it's just a season. Maybe it's just this week is extra busy or this month is extra busy or whatever. And so we just kind of like suck it up, go out there. Like nonprofits need volunteers and staff members who can do that because It does go in waves. Things do get crazy. Leading up to a gala, stuff is going to be harder. Leading up to a big volunteer push, things are going to be harder. It's just like in business, there are going to be times of the year when sales need to go up and, expense reports need to be filed. And like the accounting team all of a sudden has a big job at the last quarter and like all that stuff. Nonprofit is no different. But instead of stuffing that all the time, you have to learn to recognize when is there a pattern here that I can either overcome or is kind of a sign that I need to go and find somewhere else because this pattern isn't related to the natural fluctuations of this industry, but is more related to bad leadership, bad management.
Right, because patterns can sometimes just be the seasonal pattern of the ups and downs of regular nonprofit work. But there are other patterns that when you see them, you're like, oh, this is literally man-made. This is not like the natural ebb and flow of the work or of the year or of the process of this nonprofit. This is something else. And that's a great way to say it. Can I overcome this? Or is it something that is outside of my control to the point where maybe it's a leader enforcing their own negative patterns leadership-wise that are then affecting you.
It's the difference between building a sandcastle on the beach and the tide comes in and wipes it away versus you build a sandcastle on the beach and somebody comes and kicks it down. Like you can assume that the tide's going to come in at some point and things that you've built are going to, they're not always going to stand up. But if someone just keeps coming and kicking down your sandcastles, that's a pattern that you need to look at and go, okay, how do I address this?
Yeah. In the past 6 months, there have been a total of 2 days where I went, okay, wow, I don't have 50 million time-sensitive tasks, and I can try to work on long-term projects. Until the next day where I get hit with 1 million assignments. This is very much nonprofit work. I'm not saying that they are right or wrong, but more just that the tyranny of the urgent is real. And typically, nonprofits, each person is handling so much that you have to be able to look at all of it and pull yourself out of the weeds enough and force yourself to work on those long-term tasks, even when you feel like you're being buried. And this is not easy to do, but part of this is because the long-term tasks are generally what are going to save you from the urgent long term. Like if you work on 3 months from now today, 3 months from now, you probably won't feel like you are feeling today. But with this, you need to have a leader who is willing to allow yourself to just get a little bit above water to be able to get kind of a separate view. This doesn't mean ignore the short-term tasks, but mindset-wise, if we're just trying to get through one day at a time, it's very, very easy to feel like it's just never going to end.
Right. And I would say, too, a big piece of this, you have to take personal ownership and say, there are 10 tasks that I've been given today, but the most important thing that I need to do today is work on the ability to automate some of this stuff. So in the future, 10 tasks is actually only 9 tasks, is actually only 8 tasks. And that does mean that you're going to have to not respond to that email right away sometimes. That does mean that you're going to put something on the shelf that leadership says this needs to be done in the next hour. And you're going to say, I know they said this needs to be done in the next hour. I need to prioritize long-term thinking here and still try to get that thing done in the next hour. But I have to do this so that this department can move forward.
Yeah.
Because they're not always able to see that stuff. You're in the trenches as the volunteer leader or the staff member. You have a better view sometimes, and they say, hey, this needs to be done. Another thing that can be a really helpful deal is to actually talk to the leader and say, hey, I know that you said this needs to be done by this time. I really want to get this other thing done so we can do a better job in the future of stuff. Can we get this done tomorrow?
Yep. Or asking the leader, if I have 10 tasks to do, what are the top 2 or 3 priorities? And this question is really important because it'll give you a huge insight into the leader. We have seen leaders who are very, very clear. Oh, out of the 10 things, these 3 things need to happen. They are non-negotiables, these things, and they'll let you know what their priorities actually are. Because with nonprofit work, we need to know what the actual number one thing is that's going to push the organization forward. And we need to know that for our own projects and also for the leaders' objectives and where they're trying to go. Mm-hmm. Now, if you say it to your leader and your leader says, I gave you 10 tasks, all of them are important. All of them hold equal weight.
And
all of them.
And they always say that.
And they always say that. That is a red flag. That is just a red flag. Like when we have seen leadership like that in the past, it is sometimes indicative of a leader who does not care how many people they burn out, as long as what they want to have done gets done, no matter the cost.
There are times when, as a leader, you're going to have to look at a volunteer who says, hey, I've got 5 things. Which things are the most important? And you're going to have to honestly look at them and say, all 5 of them need to get done today. But that shouldn't be an every single time thing. There are times when it's like, you know what? We can make sure these 3 things get done today. The other 7, they can get done tomorrow or later this week. I just need to know that you've got it covered so I can go and think about other things. Because that's usually what's happening.
Yep. So what do I do? One-man marketing department for a small nonprofit with a case of founder syndrome.
Founder syndrome.
And a severe lack of resources and management.
Founder syndrome. I laughed when I read that because I was like, founder syndrome. The only reason the person is in charge is because they founded, but they don't have any other qualifiers that make them great leaders of an organization.
We talked about this a couple weeks ago in a video, how someone else was writing and lamenting. It seems like this leader has no idea how to lead. And we're like, probably. Like a lot of times the leader of an organization is simply because they founded the organization. And what it takes to found the organization versus what it takes to lead staff members within an organization, it's just 2 different skill sets. Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you get lucky and they have them both.
Yep. Sometimes they have both. Sometimes they can grow into them. Sometimes people get very, very reliant on their position within the organization. And because I'm the founder, I say this is how we're doing it. And you never want your staff or volunteers to use the term founder syndrome when referring to you as a leader. So, yeah. All right.
I'm managing social media, newsletter, blog posts, planning and writing, strategy setting, KPI setting and monitoring, paid ads, SEO, design and content creation, and in 2 different languages, also fundraising and managing 4 separate volunteer teams. Yeah, that's a lot of stuff on this person's plate. And unfortunately, sometimes if a nonprofit is small, that's very normal to have that wide of an array of responsibilities.
You read that and you said it's a lot. As you were reading, I shrugged.
like,
I'm like, yeah, it's volunteer at a small nonprofit. This is
or staff member.
At a small nonprofit. This is a lot, but from what I'm seeing, a lot of the stuff are things that should be able to be systemized in a way that decrease the amount of time that it's going to take. And if something can be systemized, it can be given to volunteers. Now, the fundraising and managing the 4 separate volunteer teams, fundraising is a very different skill than everything else that is listed there. It's different. And then the managing the 4 separate volunteer teams, that's also a different skill. The first part is very much social media, newsletter, blog post, writing, KPI setting, monitoring, paid ad, like that kind of stuff all flows within like the same vein.
The marketing stuff.
It's all the marketing stuff.
And copy.
And it flows kind of within the same type of person. The 2 different languages is just impressive. Because I couldn't do that. Also, fundraising. Fundraising here, it is just a different skill set. So I could see especially how having all that other stuff, which might be manageable for a full-time person, depending on what's expected of you. Now, I understand that some organizations, that amount of stuff would be a part-time role. Some organizations, the leader's going to expect 80 to 100 hours a week. And you're like, this literally isn't possible, depending on how many blog posts they're expecting you to put out. There's so much range here. But the fundraising, very different. It's a whole different hat that you need to put on. And if your leadership is in it with you or supporting you, they need to be involved in that fundraising aspect. But if they have founder syndrome, we've seen some founders who say, I started the organization, but I didn't get into this to ask for money. You could have an issue there if they're like that. The managing 4 separate volunteer teams, again, different skill set. We know some people in marketing who are fantastic at leading volunteers. We know other people within the nonprofit sector who, when they are in the marketing area, they are very much the technical, this is what I'm doing. I want to do the administrative work. I want to do the tasks. I don't really feel comfortable or confident leading other people.
Right. And I would say, like, this is an area where I totally understand because I worked with a lot of people who are very technicians, who are super skilled and are really, really good at doing the thing. And it can be extremely hard for those personality types to then also try to lead volunteers to do stuff for a few reasons. One, the reason that they're so good at it is because they do it and they do it really, really well. So they're like, they're fast at it too. So it pains them to watch somebody suck at it and learn the process. And they're like, it took me 10 hours to get this person to do something that would take me 1 hour to do.
Yep.
You start doing the math and you're like, that doesn't add up. And I get that. I totally get that. The other piece of it is a lot of times if you're a really great technician, you're not always a great, depending on what the thing is, you're not always a great people person. So you add that compounded on the fact that you're super good at something and it's going to take somebody else way longer to do. The math just adds up in your head. Why would I spend so much time working with other people to get something done when I can just do it myself? It'll cut the time. It'll be done way better. And just all that.
Yeah. And then for some things too, like if you're writing blog posts, sometimes there is a level of technically I can train you how to do something, but there is a certain amount of my gut feels like this is right. Or I understand the voice that my organization or the organization I'm working for is using.
Yeah, and creative endeavors are tough.
And sometimes those aren't necessarily systemized or trainable, or it's like train someone to write a blog post. I'm like, I can't train you to feel what I feel. Like it's just a different thing. And so part of it, managing the volunteer teams, if they're helping in this area, is sometimes going through figuring out what tasks you have and separating out which parts truly only you can do and which parts could be systemizable. And this might mean taking areas of the organization or areas that you're over and separating out each individual little area to see how you can get someone else involved.
So then it goes on to say, I'm so angry every day over this overworked feeling. Stuff's falling apart because I can't manage it all. And when I ask my manager to try and reduce my workload, they offer me more volunteers who are actually more work for me. And no one applies anyway, because why would you create content or do marketing for a nonprofit when you can get paid to do that somewhere else? So first of all, the angry, overworked feeling is real.
It's real.
You can't say that like it doesn't happen, because it definitely happens in nonprofit work, just like it can happen anywhere else. But in the nonprofit world, it gets a little weird, because what you're doing, you go into work every day feeling like this matters. So then you have this pull of like, I'm super angry, but I want to help make the world a better place, and they don't mesh very well together.
Or I'm super angry and now I feel guilty about feeling angry. And so now I'm going to feel guilt, anger, and because that's a terrible combination, I'm going to stuff it and then hope it gets better by tomorrow. And it's really hard. Like this line, when I asked my manager to try and reduce my workload, she offered more volunteers. On one hand, volunteers could be the thing that makes it so that you can actually move forward long term. I love working with volunteers. I think volunteer teams are fantastic. And I think that run well, volunteers can make all the difference. That being said, when you ask your manager and you're feeling this angry and this overworked, and you are obviously looking to communicate, and the reaction to reduce my workload is use more volunteers, that to me is an indication that your leader possibly doesn't understand how to work with volunteers, which could be the case, or doesn't really believe you about the amount of work that you're having, or worse yet, they don't care. And so out of this whole thing, that line to me is what is going on behind the scenes. And this might be a leader who long-term isn't prioritizing your health. And you might want to strongly sit down and consider how they have treated you in the past. And if it seems like there's room going forward for you to be able to get the space that you need to get your head above water and really to be able to be given just a little bit of a break. So that you can recharge. Because if you're staying in this role for a long term, anger showing up to work is an issue. Not like you have a character issue because you're angry. It's a red flag that something is very, very wrong. And for it to be going on this long and for your leader to not care about you, like that sucks. And I'm sorry that's happening. And I'm really wondering who this leader is. And I'd love to have a conversation with them.
But the last thing in here, and then we'll wrap this up, is they said no one applies anyway, because why would you create content or do marketing for a nonprofit when you could get paid to do that somewhere else? I understand that sentiment. I worked in a nonprofit, and we had to bring in really skilled artists for different stuff, video creation, musicians, all that kind of stuff. And it's like, these people could go out and get gigs. They could be shooting videos, doing freelance work, all of this stuff. But we had to figure out, how do we make it worth it for them? And I remember one time we had a volunteer team that was made up of photographers. And one of the things that I was able to negotiate with them was, hey, if you take photos for us, we will do photo credits for you, or help you build your portfolio, or give you job, like we can be a good job reference for you, or that kind of stuff, right? So figure out how to speak the language of what your volunteers want, and figure out how to actually offer them value, and then they will, because it's not always just money that people want.
Yeah. And people who could do this professionally, chances are that when they're doing this 40 hours a week for a company, and they're like, okay, I'm doing all this stuff, they're like, I'm doing a lot, but I don't know if I'm making a difference. People actually love to take their high value skills and donate those services to nonprofits. Or I guess they're not technically donations, but volunteer their time for nonprofits. I remember once we were working with an artist who literally worked like doing some work for celebrities, and she just wanted to volunteer. And we're like, we could offer you, trying to, she's like, I don't care. Like, I'm willing to come. Like, you can't pay me enough. You can't afford me. But I just want to know that what I'm doing is giving back. And so I'm willing to be a part of this. So never assume that people are looking at it saying, I could do it for free or I could get paid. When people are looking to volunteer their time, that's not the question that they're asking. They're usually looking at it going, yes, I could get paid for this, or I could help a few people in my community. And that's the question that people are asking. And if we can answer that question, they're going to be more likely to want to volunteer, even in those highly skilled positions.
So as you're watching this video, maybe you're thinking, gosh, I have a team of volunteers or I have a team of staff members. I'd really like to make sure that I'm promoting a healthy environment for them. We actually have a video specifically on creating a healthy team environment. Go ahead and check that out, and we'll see you over there.